1. The Lakeshore Phantom. Sarah had always cherished her summers at Lake Whisper. The family cabin, nestled among towering pines, held countless memories of lazy days and starlit nights. This year was special, though. At 17, she had finally convinced her parents to let her invite friends for a week-long stay, as Sarah pulled up to the cabin in her beat-up Jeep. Her best friend Mia, and Mia's brother Tom in tow. She couldn't contain her excitement.
"Welcome to paradise, guys!"
Sarah exclaimed as they unloaded their bags. The first day was perfect. Swimming, hiking, and lounging on the dock. But as evening fell, Sarah noticed something odd. The lake, usually teeming with life, was unnaturally still. No fish jumped, no birds called. Even the ever-present lapping of waves against the shore had ceased. "Is it always this quiet?" Mia asked, her voice seeming too loud in the eerie silence. Sarah shook her head, a slight frown creasing her brow. "No, never, it's strange." That night, as they roasted marshmallows around the fire pit, the silence was shattered by a distant splash. All three teens turned towards the sound. Through the light mist hovering over the water, they saw a figure gliding across the lake's surface.
"Hey!"
Tom called out, standing up. "You okay out there?" The figure stopped abruptly, then sank beneath the water without a sound. Concerned, they took the small motorboat out to investigate, but found no trace of the swimmer. The lake's surface was as smooth as glass, betraying no sign of disturbance. Over the next few days, the phantom-like figure became a regular occurrence, always at dusk, always in the distance, and always vanishing when approached. The teens' initial concern gave way to a growing sense of unease. On their fourth night, they decided to ask old Joe, who ran the nearby bait shop, if he knew anything about the strange occurrences. The old man's weathered face grew serious as they recounted their experiences. "You've seen her, then," he said, his voice low. "The Lady of the Lake." He went on to tell them a story that chilled them to the bone. Decades ago, a young woman named Lily had drowned in Lake Whisper. She had gone for a twilight swim and never returned. Despite extensive searches, her body was never recovered. Since then, old Joe continued, folks have reported seeing her ghost. Some say she's trying to reach the shore to finally come home. Others think she's looking for new souls to join her in the depths. The teens listened, wide-eyed, as Joe recounted years of sightings and inexplicable events around the lake. They left the bait shop feeling unsettled, the weight of the lake's dark history heavy on their minds. That night, they decided to stay up and watch for the phantom. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the mist rolled in, thicker than usual. They waited, tense and alert, but hours passed with no sign of the ghostly figure. Disappointed and exhausted, they finally went to bed well past midnight. Sarah was the last to turn in, taking one final look at the still, misty lake before closing her bedroom door. She awoke with a start in the pre-dawn hours, her heart racing though she couldn't remember why. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she noticed something amiss. There, leading from her closed bedroom door to her bedside, was a trail of wet footprints. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Slowly, hesitantly, she turned her head to look at her pillow. There, inches from her face, was a sizable puddle of water slowly soaking into the fabric. With a stifled scream, Sarah leapt from her bed and ran to wake Mia and Tom. As they huddled together in the living room, pale and shaken, they watched the sun rise over Lake Whisper. In the golden morning light, the lake looked peaceful, beautiful even. But now they knew the truth. Beneath that tranquil surface lurked a decades-old tragedy, a restless spirit, and a mystery that would haunt their dreams for years to come. As they packed up to leave later that day, each of them took a final look at the lake. Just for a moment, Sarah thought she saw a pale hand wave from beneath the surface. She blinked and it was gone. But as they drove away, she couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter with the Lakeshore Phantom was far from over. 2. The Heatwave Hitchhiker. The summer of 2023 would go down in history as one of the hottest on record. As Jack Wright, a 28-year-old software engineer, embarked on his cross-country road trip, he had no idea he was driving into a nightmare. It was day 3 of his journey when things started to go wrong. The air conditioning in his old Ford Taurus had given up the ghost somewhere in the Nevada desert, leaving Jack to suffer in the sweltering heat. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jack's car started to sputter. No, Jack muttered, guiding the failing vehicle to the shoulder of the deserted highway. With a final wheeze, the engine died. Jack got out, popping the hood only to be greeted by a blast of steam. He didn't need to be a mechanic to know this was bad. Reaching for his phone, his heart sank. No service. He was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but miles of shimmering asphalt stretching out before and behind him. With no other choice, Jack started walking, hoping to find help or at least a signal. The residual heat from the day radiated from the ground, and despite the setting sun, sweat poured down his face. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped rapidly, a small mercy in Jack's dire situation. He had been walking for what felt like hours when he saw it. A pair of headlights in the distance, growing larger as they approached. Relief flooded through him as he waved his arms frantically, flagging down the approaching vehicle. It was an old Cadillac, its chrome fixtures gleaming in the moonlight. The car slowed to a stop beside him, and the passenger window rolled down. The driver was an elderly man, his face a map of wrinkles, eyes hidden behind thick glasses. "You look like you could use a ride, son," he said, his voice raspy but kind. "Yes, please," Jack said gratefully, climbing into the passenger seat. "My car broke down a few miles back. I'm trying to get to the next town." The old man nodded, pulling back onto the highway. "Name's Earl. Don't worry, we'll get you where you need to go." As they drove, Jack couldn't help but notice a few odd things. Despite the lingering heat outside, the car's interior was ice cold. Jack shivered, his sweat-soaked clothes now a liability. "It's freezing in here," Jack commented, rubbing his arms. "Don't you find it cold?" Earl smiled, never taking his eyes off the road. "You'll get used to it, son. We all do, eventually." Jack also realized that Earl never blinked, never turned his head. He seemed almost static, like a hyper-realistic mannequin rather than a living, breathing person. Trying to shake off his growing unease, Jack attempted small talk. "So, you live around here, Earl?" "You could say that," Earl replied cryptically. "Been driving these roads for a long, long time." As they neared civilization, Jack saw a sign illuminated by the headlights. "Welcome to Millbrook, population 4,000. He breathed a sigh of relief, eager to get out of this strange car and its even stranger driver. But as they entered the town, Jack's relief turned to confusion, then horror. Millbrook was completely abandoned. Decades-old cars rusted on the streets, buildings stood with broken windows and faded paint, weeds growing through cracks in the sidewalk. It looked like no one had lived here for half a century. What is this place?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Earl turned to him then, and Jack recoiled in shock. Where there should have been eyes behind those thick glasses, there were only empty, hollow sockets. "Welcome home, Jack," Earl said, his voice now echoing as if from a great distance.
You're one of us now.
In that moment, Jack understood with terrifying clarity. He hadn't hitched a ride with a good Samaritan. He had hitched a ride with death itself, joining the souls of those who had perished in a long-forgotten heatwave disaster. This ghostly town was to be his eternal resting place, forever trapped in the moment of its demise. As the car rolled to a stop in front of a dilapidated house, Jack realized his journey had come to an end. But not the one he had planned. The summer heat, the broken-down car, the kindly old driver, it had all been a path leading him here, to this limbo between worlds. Earl turned to him, his skeletal grin gleaming in the moonlight. "Best get settled in, son. We've got an eternity ahead of us." Jack stepped out of the car, his feet touching the cracked pavement of his new home. As he watched, Earl and the Cadillac faded away like a mirage, leaving him alone in the ghostly town. The heat was gone now, replaced by an eternal, bone-deep chill. The cold of the grave that would be his companion for eternity. 3. The cursed sunscreen. Lily Matthews had been looking forward to this beach vacation for months. As a software developer from rainy Seattle, the promise of sun, sand, and sea was irresistible. There was just one problem. Her pale, freckled skin and red hair made her extremely susceptible to sunburn. On her first day in the small coastal town of Port Harmony, Lily went in search of strong sunscreen. She found a quaint little shop just off the boardwalk, its windows filled with beach gear and souvenirs. A bell tinkled as she entered, and she was immediately struck by the musty smell and dim lighting. Behind the counter stood an old woman, her skin deeply tanned and weathered. "Can I help you, dear?" the woman asked, her voice raspy. "I'm looking for sunscreen," Lily explained. "The strongest you have. I burn really easily." The old woman's eyes lit up. "Ah, I have just the thing." She disappeared into the back room, returning with a sleek black bottle. The label read, "Eternal Shade, 100% sun protection. You'll never burn again." "This is our special formula," the woman said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Guaranteed protection, or your money back." Lily was skeptical but desperate. "I'll take it," she said, handing over her credit card. As the woman rang up the sale, Lily could have sworn she saw a flicker of something in the old woman's eyes. Pity? Regret? But when she looked again, the woman was smiling blandly. "Enjoy your vacation, dear," she said as Lily left the shop. "And remember, a little goes a long way." The next morning, Lily applied the sunscreen liberally before heading to the beach. The lotion had a strange metallic smell, but it went on smoothly and seemed to absorb quickly into her skin. To her delight, Lily spent the entire day on the beach without even a hint of redness. She swam, she sunbathed, she played volleyball with some new friends, all without a single worry about sunburn. Thrilled with her purchase, Lily used the sunscreen daily. But by the third day, she noticed something strange. Her skin, instead of developing a tan, seemed to be getting paler. It felt unusually cool to the touch, and in certain lights it looked almost translucent. Concerned, Lily decided to skip the sunscreen the next day. But within minutes of stepping into the sunlight, her skin began to burn and blister at an alarming rate. She ran back to her hotel room, confused and frightened. As the week progressed, Lily's condition worsened. Her skin became nearly transparent, her veins clearly visible beneath the surface. She felt constantly cold, even in the summer heat, and found herself avoiding sunlight altogether. Panicked, Lily returned to the beach shop, hoping the old woman could explain what was happening. But she found the store boarded up, a weathered "For Lease" sign hanging crookedly in the window. A neighboring shopkeeper, seeing her distress, approached her. "You all right, miss? You're looking a bit pale." When Lily explained about the sunscreen and the old woman, the shopkeeper's face grew serious. "That old place? It's been abandoned for years. Not since old Mrs. Shade died." "Died?" Lily echoed, a chill running down her spine. The shopkeeper nodded. "Nasty business, that. They say she was working on some new kind of sunscreen. Tested it on herself. They found her, well, let's just say it wasn't pretty. Looked like she'd been avoiding the sun for decades, all shriveled up and pale as a ghost." Lily felt faint. She looked down at her arms, the web of veins visible through her nearly transparent skin, and realized the horrible truth. The sunscreen hadn't been protecting her from the sun. It had been turning her into something that could no longer tolerate it. As her vacation came to an end, Lily found herself dreading her return to Seattle. How could she explain her new nocturnal lifestyle to her friends and family? How could she continue her job when she couldn't bear even the weakest sunlight? Sitting in her dark hotel room, the curtains drawn tight, Lily looked at the black bottle of sunscreen. The label seemed to mock her now. "You'll never burn again." It had delivered on its promise, but at a terrible cost. She was no longer the sun-seeking vacationer who had arrived in Port Harmony a week ago. She had become something else. A creature of darkness, forever banned from the light she had once loved. As she packed her bags, preparing for a night flight back to Seattle, Lily wondered if there were others out there like her. Other victims of the cursed sunscreen, hiding from the sun, living in eternal shadow. She took one last look at the beach through a crack in the curtains. The setting sun painted the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink, colors she would never again be able to enjoy in person. With a heavy heart, Lily turned away from the window and zipped up her suitcase. Her summer vacation was over, but her nightmare was just beginning.